Well, what I'm hoping to do today is talk a little bit about how we can make them work a little bit better, okay? So before we do, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. One, you can actually have some sort of an emergency going on in your facility. So what we would like to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what really is emergency. We're going to talk a little bit about what's actually required from an OSHA standpoint. We'll talk about those minimum requirements. We're going to talk about the interaction you can have with your emergency responders. And when we talk about emergency responders, we're talking about all of them. Police officers, ambulance companies, the local fire department. We're going to talk about responsibilities within your facilities. Who's going to do what? Who's going to be your head count person? Who's going to take care of your sprinkler systems? Those kind of things. And then, of course, working with the media. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that. And then after the emergency, what do I do as a business owner, as a safety professional, as somebody that's responsible for getting this place back in order? What do I need to do? What do I need to look for from that standpoint? What is an emergency? Poses an immediate threat to, of course, health, life, property, environment, has already caused loss of life, health, detriments, property damage, and of course environmental damage, and then high probability that it's escalating and it's going to cause immediate danger to all of the above again. Okay? Those are the things that we would consider from a definition standpoint what an emergency is. Fire, earthquake, high windstorms, flooding, landslides, chemical responses, major vehicle, medical emergencies, building collapse, of course, and then etc. When we start talking about maybe these top 3 or 4 here, because as David pointed out, I'm lucky enough to be working for a company that's had all of our 5 manufacturing facilities SHARP certified and of course graduates. So that means we've had our emergency action plan looked at many times, it's passed muster. The consultants from OSHA are just wonderful about, hey, do you think you ought to look at this, or what do you think you ought to do differently? I remember 1995, the Murrah building in Oklahoma City killed all those innocent young people, okay? Whoops. How about the, in Oso, Washington, the landslide? When I first was putting this presentation together some time ago, I got to thinking about, well, what industrial setting would this kind of entail? Well, as luck would have it, I went to the Swanson group, and their sawmill and their planer mill is actually in Glendale, is sitting right up against a hillside. And this could happen to them. That's just one example of a place where that could happen. And then we know about the Cascade, right? Earthquake. We have a huge viaduct in Medford, and how many times have they told us over the years, there's a better than average chance it won't sustain any kind of an earthquake at all. It's going to go to the ground. So we're going to have big problems there. And then of course this over time has become worse and worse. British Columbia Lumber Mill, 2014. This was nothing more than a union dispute about people that had been laid off and were not going to be called back because the mill decided that we're going to change how we're going to do things. They shut the mill down. They kept it down for a certain length of time that said the union guys don't have to be rehired. So this guy loses it, goes in and starts shooting people, and I can't remember exactly how many people he shot. But this really brings it home because, again, we're kind of in a timber town here in Medford. We still have a lot of wood products going on. So if you don't think it can happen here. What are required for an emergency action plan? OSHA has some minimum elements, okay? And again, I've got some handouts there for you. Procedures for emergency evacuation, including the type of evacuation and exit route. You gotta have primary routes, you gotta have secondary routes, you gotta have assembly points. Those are really important, and of course we always want to train on those, and we'll talk about that as we get closer. Procedure for accounting for your employees after the evacuation. So depending upon who your headcount person is that person here on a regular basis? Is that person a lead? In our big mill in Medford, we have 125 employees on the floor of the mill at any one time. So we basically have come up with a plan that if it happens and we have to evacuate the mill, the head dryer tender or the person in charge of the dryers for that day, he goes one way, and the person that's in charge of the spray line or the finish end of the, I'm sorry, not the finish end, but the dry, what we call a dry end mill, that person goes the other way. And because they always have the daily roster. They know who's on vacation, who called in sick, who's supposed to be here, who's not supposed to be here. And they can in turn communicate back and forth across from one side of the mill to the other, to the west and to the east. Procedures for reporting a fire. This is very, very important. And again, in here, what is your signal for reporting a fire? Do you call, like, again, back at our Medford facility, we have a powerhouse that has somebody there 24/7, 365 days. They never leave the control room unattended. There's always somebody in there. If you have to go to the restroom, you got to call one of the assistants over. That person will stay in the room, and they make the phone calls. If you have an emergency at Medford Plywood, whether it be a fire emergency, a medical emergency, a chemical spill, you simply just get on the radio and you call the powerhouse, and they in turn will call 911 for you. That way we don't get multiple calls. Procedure to follow for emergency operations, shutting down critical equipment. That is really, really important. And again, we have that because we have electricians and we have millwrights. They're there all the time. They know what each other do. Things like power distribution centers, if you have to, they can go to a power distribution center and shut the power off rather than shutting the whole main off. For those of you that might have been around in 1998, we burned, and I say we because I was working for both places at the time, we burned 17 acres of mill under one roof to the ground. A whole lot of dominoes fell that night, but one of those dominoes that fell was the incident commander said, we need to shut off the power. That's all he said. Well, looking back on that, they made the call. Dispatch made the call, we need PP&L. They came out, they pulled the fuses out on the street, killed all the power for the entire place. Which, guess what? There's 5 water pumps that flow some unbelievable number of water per gallons. That shut off all of those too. If we simply said, we need somebody to go shut off the PDC for this part of the mill or the PDC for this part of the mill or so on, I don't know that the outcome would have changed, but it certainly had a chance to change, okay? So that's really, really important. So that needs to be in your plan. Procedures to follow under rescue and medical duties. We have a plan that has medical people involved. Actually, we have a lot of people in all of our mills that are trained in first aid and CPR. We're lucky enough to have a CPR and first aid trainer on site. We don't have to pay for classes, so we get a lot of people. So that first person that's trained in CPR and first aid, that chooses to be in charge, that chooses to do patient care, will be that person that takes care of the patient care, and then we have people funneling in after that. And then the name and the job title for the employees to contact for more information about their duties. We have, again, you'll see, I had to pull some of the names out of here just so that we could kind of keep it. So not everybody in the world has phone numbers, but you can see that there's certain people that do certain things at certain times. So again, it's all part of the plan. Any questions so far? Being pretty easy on me. All right.
I have one, Dennis.
Yes. John?
You know, I work out at EWP and I've been there for almost 5 years in June. You know, we've done the emergency action plan, you know, evacuation. So in your judgment, is it better to do it like the video that you were showing or the way that we do it?
I think the way that you do it is probably a little bit better. I wish you could have seen that whole video. It was crazy. If you ever get a chance, just go on YouTube. I think is where I picked that one up, that YouTube, and it's The Office. Watch that whole video. I apologize. I've been watching it over and over, and I thought I had it in there embedded good enough, but apparently I didn't. No, absolutely. You just need to kind of plan, do the evacuation, but change the scenario. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. But and you guys are really good at changing the scenario. Our other pocket of excellence, of course, is Dave here. Excuse me. He's the one that probably taught me how to do White City Veneer, one of our pockets of excellence. He also showed me that you can do this and make it work pretty well. They simply they took a piece of cardboard, put some flames on it, put fire, they put it up onto a motor, they put it someplace else in the mill, and they will actually pull the alarm. Nobody knows anything, and it's almost fun to watch because you're standing up in the office to see if anybody reacts. And they just stand there and pull the ear for a few seconds. Then finally somebody goes, oh, that's the alarm, we gotta go. And everybody goes where they're supposed to go. And we'll talk about those duties here in just a second. But people that are supposed to be fighting fire, they go and fight the fire. The people that are evacuating the mill, evacuate the mill. People that are supposed to meet the responders, they go to there. And then the shift supervisor is literally walking through the mill to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do in a timely manner.
I have a question.
Yes?
So with the assigning responsibilities, what if people are in and out? I mean, the main are in and out all the time, doing meetings and different stuff.
That is a great question. So, has anybody ever seen the movie We Are Soldiers? I think it's maybe one of the greatest leadership movies ever produced, and that certainly wasn't what it was for. But what it teaches you is that the major, can't remember his name, Morgan? Hal Morgan was his name. Hal Morgan, he was a Vietnam vet, he was a major, and he's the one that brought 1st Cavalry back. And just to talk about it, so his goal in life was, if I go down when I step off that helicopter on the battleground, the sergeant major knows what I'm supposed to be doing, and he's going to take my spot. And the sergeant major, if he goes down, then the platoon leader, the sergeant knows, and it just goes on and on and on. And so that was what was really cool about that, and it taught me, if this young lady here is taking my place because I'm at a meeting today, or I'm at the restroom, or I'm on vacation, or whatever the case may be, I need to teach her, if this is my position, I need to teach her to know all the things that I need to do in case she's taking my place. So that's, and we'll talk about that. Whose job is it today? When we talk about an alarm system, one of the things that we need to talk about is there a definitive, is there a change in what kind of alarm for what kind of a situation? Are we evacuating the mill because of a fire? Are we evacuating the mill because of an earthquake? Are we evacuating the mill because of a workplace violence situation? Okay? And depending upon the size of your plant and where you go on your evacuation, workplace violence. I hate to even bring this up, I just hate it, but if we all go to our normal evacuation spots, what did we just create? A killing field. Okay? So what we want to do is plan that out where we're going to go someplace different. But again, what is different about this alarm versus that alarm? Training. An employer must designate employees to assist in safe emergency evacuation of other employees. This is an interesting part because what you really need to do is, there can be just anybody on the floor, but you need to make sure that if I'm evacuating the mill and it's my job, I want to make sure that I get George. If George is working in my part of the mill, or Ryan's working in my part of the mill, and I'm going to get them out, I'm going to make that as part of my job. I'm kind of in charge of making sure that my portion of the mill is getting out of there. But all of a sudden, Ryan gets scared of the fire, or Ryan gets scared of the chemical spill, and he locks up, okay? He freezes in place. Well, then it's my job, and maybe George's job together, to calm Ryan down, get him underneath the armpits, and if we have to, we drag him out of the mill. But we need to look for those kind of folks out there because they're out there. Review. An employer must review the emergency action plan with each employee covered, okay? So here's that magic number in the sand. It's 10. If it's less than 10 employees, it's kind of like safety committees. If it's less than 10 employees, you can do it informally. We can just have an office group together and say, hey, this is the evacuation plan. If you can, go out the front door. If not, go out the side door, go out the back door, and we're all going to meet over here at the corner of the motel, okay? We all know where that spot is. We may mark that spot, but that's what we're going to do. If it's greater than 10, and I don't know how many people are in here, it must be a very formal and a very written plan. You must lay it all out, figure out who's going to do what. So it's kind of the, you can remember, it's kind of the same thing as safety committees. When the plan is new or the employee is new to the job. So every employee that comes to work for Boise Cascade goes through the emergency action plan. Every employee finds out where in the mill they're working and which is the easiest most common sense place to go. But sure as I'm standing here, if you're on the green end of the dryer today, you're supposed to go to the west. If you're on the dry end of the dryer, you're supposed to go to the east. So we need to make sure that we show them both places that they need to go. One of our normal, evacuation routes actually takes us through what's called the tank farm, where all of our glues are mixed up, so there's different kinds of chemicals over there. Not real hazardous stuff, but again, if it's a chemical problem, we have to completely rethink this. We're gonna go to the south, then we're gonna go to the east, okay? When the employee's responsibilities under the plan change. So George gets a new job, so he's gotta learn what is his new plan, what does he do now? He went from laying up plywood to running the spray line. So now George has some responsibilities different. Maybe he turns into the guy that does the evacuation check, does the head count when he gets there, okay? Versus just evacuates the mill or becomes a firefighter. And then when the plans change, of course. So our plans are changing almost, it seems like, quite often. When you look at this, you can see it again. This is one that I put together a couple, 3 years ago. Whenever they make a change at EWP, they actually put when the change was. Like in 2010, we did a nearby fire threat in extreme. There's a place in here that talks about that. In 2010, we had one of the bigger fires that I've ever been on in White City when we burned the old Downriver Forest Products to the ground. That big old dome building that used to sit across from the fire station. So whenever the plans change, you've got to have some training with the folks that it affects. Questions? Yes.
You talked about the workplace violence. If we had, in our facility, we don't have it set up to where we have a different alarm for that. We do have a kind of a different plan for it, but probably more of an announcement. Do you guys have different?
That alone makes it different. If you don't pull the evacuation alarm and you have some sort of communications, that changes.
Well, that's only been talked about. It's not like an official plan for us. Is that something that you guys do? Is you have a plan for it and train employees on what to do?
We have a plan. We don't have a different alarm for it either. We just don't pull the alarm. What we will do is we will communicate it through our radios, because there's literally sometimes I think there's 50 or 60, 100 people in our mills that have radios. We'll just talk about that. We have a different location for that. What we do is we take them in another direction with lots of metal and lots of obstructions between the mill and where the evacuation point is.
I see. Okay.
So we don't take them to the normal every, east and west sides of the mill. Okay? Interaction with emergency responders, all right? So be proactive, invite your local emergency responders. I can tell you in the years that I was a fireman, before I really did a lot of this, maybe the most proactive business in all of Southern Oregon for getting the emergency responders down there was then 3M, now Carestream. We went through that mill on a regular basis because, again, a lot of that mill has some dark spots in it. We had to know where we were going, what we were doing, and where the people would be, or where the emergency would be. I've got a second or two. I'm going to tell you one more quick war story about being a fireman. 3M. They used to have a lot of false alarms, okay? All kinds of different things, chemical alarms, fire alarm, and sure enough, everybody would be out. There'd be somebody standing there at the door when we pulled up, hey, this is what's going on. Sorry, it's a false alarm, blah, blah, blah. And all these fine people were out, so we turn our fire engines around, we go back to the fire station. It's about 3 in the morning one morning, sure enough, 3M, fire alarm sounding, 3M. I'm a young fireman, because I was young once. Many years ago, I grabbed my turnouts and I put my coat up on the engine. This was in the old days when the firemen faced backwards in the seats and the captain and the driver were, of course, facing forward. I throw my turnout coat up, I pull my pants up, and I'm sitting there at 3 in the morning. I'm leaning my head back, I'm sleeping, my helmet's up on the engine compartment. Couldn't hear anything that's going on because back then we didn't. Captain. All of a sudden, I'm sitting behind the captain, and the window flies open. They say, they got a fire. They got a what? Yeah, they've gone to the 3rd system. So at mixing and milling, they have 3 systems there. They have a manual system or an automatic system that tries to put the fire out. Then they go to a manual system that tries to put the fire out, and then they'll actually physically get with a big fire extinguisher and try to put it out. And they were actually actively fighting a fire when we were driving down, and thank God they got it out, okay? Because that's the first time it ever happened to me. It scared me to death, and from that day on, I'm sitting high and tight when I'm going to 3M on any kind of alarm, because you just don't know when it's gonna happen. So again, work with your emergency responders. Have them visit your location, pre-plan the session. It's really good. It gets us to know each other, the faces, who's gonna do what, where are you gonna be, all those kind of things. Accountability points. I told you, we always knew where the 3M people would be when we got there. We knew where our head person was. Number of employees, hours of operation. A lot of our operations at Boise Cascade, depending on if it's day shift, swing shift, or graveyard, all those numbers change. And their hours of operation change also. We have some locations at Boise that work 24/7. We have other locations that work two 10-hour shifts and so on. Special needs for non-ambulatory people. Not a big problem for us. We don't have a lot of those folks, if any, but maybe 3M does, or CareStream, I shouldn't say that, CareStream. Other employers, let the emergency responders know what needs you might have. Meet your company management, incident commanders, and pre-plan emergency action. What I mean by that is, in the latter part of my career as a fireman, I did a lot of move-up time. I went from a captain on an engine company to a battalion chief. And so what I learned from that was, if I can get with the mill manager, if I can get with the facility manager, the shift manager, and find out what their needs are, then I can really get my crews to do what they need to do, okay? So I'm looking for basically the highest operating person on that particular shift. Hazards within the building. Is there construction hazards? Is there holes in the floor? Is there unguarded equipment that's still running that we need to know about? Building layout, construction types, and again, is it a metal building, is it a wood building, okay? And then utility locations. Where's the natural gas shut off? Where's the electrical shut off? And again, when I met with those plant managers, they would tell me, and that was, again, I talk about the dominoes that fell the night of the fire, because that's really what it is. It was a career fire for me. We did not have our mill manager, we did not have basically our Boise Cascade incident commander at the command post. And that's one of the places where we made a mistake. Shut the electricity off. Had we had a representative from Boise Cascade at that command center, we could have said, hey, whoa, time out for just a second. We're not going to cut all the power. We just need to cut sections off. Okay? So again, utility locations. And then whatever. I'm going to do it 20 minutes till. All right. Responsibilities. Any questions about being proactive with your emergency responders? I know it seems like a pretty big deal, but I can tell you from my experience, at least at Fire District 3, we welcome that. They still welcome that. The engine companies that all get together on an annual basis, come to our mills on a couple, 3 different shifts, and they will come through and they'll walk through the mill. They'll look at where's your water coming in, where's your electricity coming in, who's in charge, who are the people I need to talk to. Okay, responsibilities. If you pre-plan your emergency with your responder, everyone involved has a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities. When we pre-plan it, when we call up the local fire department, the local police department, and say, hey, we're going to run a drill at 1 o'clock today, could you possibly put that on your training schedule? Give them a little advance notice. Say, hey, we'd really like you if you would participate with us. And what you'll find is if you give them a little bit of notice, short of them being on another alarm, they love to come and play, okay? They love training. It's all part of what they do, okay? So that way then, when George, the mill manager, steps up to the fire engine and he sees that, that emergency responding SUV pickup, he's going to know that there's a battalion chief in there, and that's the guy that I need to meet with. Are your people trained and do they practice? Operations and maintenance leads. Again, back to that. If you're an operations person, you're going to meet with a command person, a battalion chief, Okay, who's gonna be running the alarm? If you're a maintenance person, I think I have this here, no. If you're a maintenance person, chances are what we'd like you to do is meet with, for instance, an engine company captain. Because the engine company captain is gonna take himself or herself, put the crew together, and they're gonna go in and handle whatever the emergency is. Be it a fire, be it a chemical spill, be it an electrical problem, those kind of things. They wanna meet with maintenance leads because who has more information about those type of things? Anything special? How do I disconnect this piece of equipment? Where do we shut this off? How do I disconnect or shut off the natural gas? Okay? And then accountability. Who's gonna be your roll call person? And then of course, sweepers. This is one that I don't know that we do a great job. I think White City Veneer probably does about as good a job as anything.
They do a really good job.
They really do.
I can tell you, being an outside person, they made me do a, was that the yellow chart, Carl? A
Pre-test.
And I am always aware of.
You have to sign in and sign out.
Yep, and
Yeah.
I'm always aware of a 3-step. I'm always holding that, and I have safety goggles on, so they do a great job.
Thank you. They do a great job at White City Veneer. Not all of our locations are as good as they are about, well, we have a utility person in, maybe we have somebody filling up the propane tank. Those kind of visitors. Who's our contractors? We're getting ready to do a great big project at one of our mills, and right now we've got, I don't know, half a dozen different not contractors, but personnel from the contractors doing different work. So we got to make sure we know where they are. And then in-house emergency responders. I'm sure the gentleman back here, I've already lost his name, cringes every time he sees the word fire from internal, but we have a very distinct plan, and if you take this and read it, it says you will only be involved in incipient stage fires. Beginning stages, this corner, this trash can that's on fire, as soon as it hits the ceiling, starts across, guess what that becomes? Structure fire, time to leave. Either that door or that door, okay? So we give them that training. When do you leave, when do you not leave? And of course your medical and maybe your utility control people. And then the evacuation routes, we've already talked about alternate routes. Do any of your coworkers need help getting out? Non-ambulatory. Or Ryan here, he just locked up. He just got scared, right Ryan?
Yep.
All right. First 3 to 5 minutes is really sets the stage for success. And again, I learned that from my fire service years. When you get on scene of a big alarm, a multi-story building, a motel for instance, if it's on fire, that first 3 to 5 minutes is crucial if we're going to have a good outcome. We have to make our plan, we have to put everything together. Did we get everybody out of the building? Did we make sure that we know where the fire is? How's it going to get to the next spot, okay? Do I have fire blocks where I need them to be? Company incident commander, I already talked a little bit about that. They first meet with the on-scene emergency responders. Company operations managers, maintenance people meet with the engine company. Again, I got ahead of myself again. Roll call person, who does that roll call for it? Because it's so important that every day, again, that's the reason these two people ended up being our roll call people. We used to try to put something together for the folks in the office. Well, why don't we have the person that does all of our data entry and accounting and inventory stuff, we'll make her the head count person. Well, she goes home at 3 in the afternoon, what are you gonna do then? Oh, we better come up with a better plan. Well, we'll put the roll sheet out in the evacuation spot. Well, that's great today, but what if it changes tomorrow? So this is what they came up with. This was their problem solving. These two people know everybody that's in the mill and who's supposed to be there and who's not supposed to be there, okay? So they work very, very well for us. What are your priorities on any kind of an emergency? Life saving is always first. Incident stabilization and hazard mitigation. How are we going to stop what's going on, or at least slow down its progress? And then, of course, property conservation. How do we stop it at this wall? Where are we going to stop it at? Okay? Questions, responsibilities. Again, I go back to that, probably the one spot we could do a better job at Boise as I know what my job is today. George knows what his job is today. Ryan knows what his job is today. But this young lady right here is going to take George's job tomorrow because George is on vacation for the next 2 weeks. Does she know what George knows about what his responsibilities are on the scene? All right.
I don't.
You don't.
It's okay, I'm
All right. Train the plan. It only works if each person understands his or her job. Again, that just goes back to read it, understand it, work in small groups. You only need to bring in the people that have some sort of responsibility. Because if the rest of us in this room, the 4 of us are the people that are doing certain things, the rest of you can evacuate, okay? We know what we need to get done. Whose job is it today? And again, I got ahead of myself. Whose job is it today? If she's taking George's job, she needs to know what George knows. Have you trained the people that are replacing you for a fire, for earthquake, weather, workplace violence? Bag house truck bin fire, 2013. Now why do I put this up here? Because it's not really a big fire, but this over here is what's on fire, the bag house. All you're seeing is the smoke coming from the truck bins. But why is this important? Because here's your powerhouse manager. This is the head of maintenance for the powerhouse. This is a captain, and that's a battalion chief over there. They're right there. They can tell you when you're going to shut something down, when you're going to start it back up. Where's this thing going to go from here? If it's already left here and got clear up into these cyclones and into the truck bin, where else is it going to go? And how much material is there in there we're going to have to deal with? That's why that's important. If you don't think we can't have an earthquake here locally, this is only 1993. Very quick war story. I'm sitting at the fire station with a California guy, okay? Richard Torres, great friend of mine. I'm sitting watching TV and it's 5-ish in the afternoon. Is anybody else in here when that happened in 1993? I'm sitting there and all of a sudden the room starts rumbling and I looked at Richard and I go, what was that? He goes, you just sat through your first earthquake. Because I'm an Oregon boy. I was born and raised in Eagle Point. I go, really? That's what they feel like? He goes, oh yeah, that's what they feel like. So we of course did what we needed to do, get our vehicles out, figure out what's going on. Look at the damage that was caused in Klamath Falls. And that was a really tiny little thing. Anybody remember this, 1997? Absolutely. This is the plaza in Ashland. That's just the rooftops of the plaza buildings. The rest of that's water. It can happen very, very quickly, especially in businesses. And then of course I go back to that mill shooting in 2014. Questions? All right, so working with the media will get a story or the story, all right? They don't really, they really want the truth. They work so hard to get the truth, but if they can't get it, they want to be the first ones on the air with exclusive news for Channel 5 or 10 or 12 or whoever it's going to be. They're going to find somebody to talk to, okay? They're going to find the most least, and it never fails. They find the least knowledgeable person to get a quote for the news, okay? That's who they're looking for. So how do you prevent that from happening in your company? Your plan needs to address who's going to be your company spokesman. And you try to train, and again, I'm ahead of myself again. You need to train everybody. By the way, in the emergency action plan, folks, okay, it says that so-and-so is going to be our company spokesperson. We're going to get there. That's one of our emergency calls that our powerhouse makes. Hey, so-and-so, get down here. We got a fire, we got a chemical spill, we got a whatever. The press is going to be here any second. You need to assign this task to a person that's had training and familiar with dealing with the media. And then of course, again, back to that, train our employees to please contact the spokesperson. Establish a place, a time, company person. You heard the catch to where you want them to go, okay? All the media wants to go to one spot with one person, okay? And they're going to get as much information as we can give them at that time. All right, so I'm hoping that this one will work. Now again, I showed you an earlier example of what you might not want to do. This is going to be the company spokesman at the Swanson Group Fire in Springfield.
Again, I want to give you the description
I'm gonna try to move this forward a little bit.
250 employees at Springfield Plywood at the end of the year. Not all there at that time. It was during a shift change that one of the witnesses told us that it was an electrical fire that spread some dust and then engulfed the building. He said in 5 minutes. He said the flames were literally chasing them out the door, and employees that were just checking in immediately, like everyone there, retreated and got out safely. And at this point, we know those employees being bused to a staging area at the Winco in Springfield, where their cars, well, that's where they're being bused to so they can get home. The thing is, all their belongings are back in that building, so at least they didn't get out safely.
Yeah, that's the most important thing at this point. Alerts are going out by the Community Emergency Notification System tonight, letting everybody know a 1 mile radius has been evacuated from that area. So the boundaries are 26th and
So here's the Swanson Group's
so if you live in
spokesperson
that
for this
area,
channel.
if you drive in that area, they're not allowing anybody inside that area next. Obviously affecting traffic all around that area. We would like to go to KZI9 news reporter Sarah Hurwitz, who is going to talk to a witness in the area. And Sarah, you're kind of on the outskirts there of 28th and Main.
Hey there, Renee. This is Tim Garner filling in for Sarah at the moment. She's attempting to get more information. But I'm here with Doug, who was working at the plant at the time that this went down. Sir, what can you tell me about this?
Well, it was an in-feed fire from dryer 3. It had to have started somewhere on top of the dryer where there's usually layers of dust. There's like pixie dust that goes up like flames, obviously. So it went up and we got Peter, we got him out, and Savano, the utility guy, we got him out. He was way too close to it. And that's about it. And it went up, it went to the roof, went to the rafters, and it headed toward the green end of our mill. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars of finished product done. It's still on fire. It's gone. Swanson Group's gone. It hasn't hit the boiler yet, but the boiler is steamy and it's gonna catch, and when it does, it's gonna blow. Anything off, any oil or gas or anything like that. There's propane tanks, acetylene tanks that you can hear blowing from way out here. You can hear them. And
how did you feel as you saw this happening? What was your first thought?
My first thought is my life is going to be over if I don't get out of here and get my friends out of here. Their lives are going to end. They got families. You know, I got a family, and it's a bad situation. Very bad.
Do you have any idea what your next step is going to be?
My next step is going to be finding another job. I've been hired a month and the bill's gone. And go somewhere else.
All right.
Hey Dennis, quick thing I just wanted to share with you. I was at Timber Products when that happened, and I just poured through all the news I could. And 2 things I learned from that, and I called Jennifer Rudy after that and congratulated her for the weird thing to do after a big lost mill. But 2 things I heard, and even in that interview, you heard him talk about combustible dust.
Yes.
They had obviously trained about it, otherwise how would he even know that dust can ignite?
Yes.
They had trained about it, but the truth is that they had cleaned it very thoroughly like 2 weeks before that fire. Combustible dust, overhead cleanup. The other thing that I heard from other interviews was that they all had to evacuate to their primary reporting point immediately. And they all said that he didn't, but they all said that over and over again. And again, that was a reminder that they drilled that into them, they had practiced it, and that everybody got out safely except for one person who was in the bathroom and had a burn on her arm, I think, as far as I know.
That's it, that was the only one.
Yeah, so anyway, to me it was a success story, not losing a mill, but as far as the safety procedures and the training that they had done, it was really a success.
Thank you, Mike, and I had that conversation too, and that's why I actually called Jennifer and said, can I use this guy in my presentation? She goes, oh, we'd love to have him. Because this is as far off to the one side as you can get somebody. He was a temp. He was a temp at the mill for almost a month. And so my opening statement here, when I talk about the fact that they will look for the most unknowledgeable person to find, they found him. They found him. It happens. It's a perfect example. So let's finish this up really quick. I've got just a couple, 3 more slides. After the emergency, before you re-enter the building, you must ensure the building is safe. That just goes without saying. So we have a plan, okay? Again, I use us all the time. Boise Cascade has a plan. We have structural engineers that work for us. We're kind of lucky in that. So we have structural engineers, but we're still going to get the local PP&L to come in and take a look at it structurally, see if our wires, what's going on there. We're also going to get a Vista natural gas. So, are the utilities controlled? Has the seismic valve that we have 2 of at EWP, 1 at the office, 1 at the plant, I think, okay? Has the seismic valve, do we need to get it reset? Who's allowed to reset that? Well, as far as I know, the only people that can reset the seismic valve is Avista. They have to come in and make sure that the building is safe to reoccupy before they're going to turn on the natural gas again. Utility companies, of course, I've talked a little bit about, is a building structurally sound? So you're going to have to get building authorities, you're going to have to get inspectors in there from everything from structural inspectors to electrical inspectors, and they're all going to have to take a look at this from that standpoint. Danger of collapse. Surrounding ground. Again, I'm a Southern Oregon boy, so I really looked at the lady that I work with at Boise to talk about this. Sinkholes, earthquake fissures, down electrical lines, etc. After an earthquake, after the building possibly is getting close to collapse, what other things can be out there that will get you, okay? So again, earthquake fissures are a big deal because she grew up in Southern California. Well, I call it Southern California. She grew up in the Bay Area. Emergency action plans are performed. So in summary, build your plan, involve all, maybe not all, but most of the people that you can, because it lends ownership. It's not just a piece of paper sitting in a book up on a shelf somewhere. People are involved in writing it, people are involved in planning it, people are involved in executing it when we decide to do it. Exercise your plan, run a drill, okay? Identify your weaknesses, and in the fire service, it's almost, not a badge of honor, but it's almost a badge of honor to make a mistake on the training ground. Who learns better from a mistake on a training ground when you go to the real deal and you got to run inside of a burning building? You know what to expect when you get there because you've already made a dumb mistake, okay? And you won't make it again. Adjust your plan. Build on your weaknesses. So again, run your plan. Find out what your weaknesses are and then build on those weaknesses to remember the process changes. The action plan must be tuned up. And again, I go back to this plan because every time they find something new, they put it in the book. And then execute your plan often. Use different scenarios, and that's probably the biggest thing. How many different scenarios did you use last year, Larry?
Trained on?
Trained on.
I believe we did
2 last year. Okay. Power outage
Not power outage, and I think fire drill last year.
Okay. Questions? I know I went through this in a quick hurry. Yes.
But there's a couple of things on that, just by our experience there at Boise, that I think anybody could have happen. First of all, like you have the fire department, police department, or whoever, you bring them in, you show them where your plants are, you show them what's in your plants, you show them where to go. You should do the same thing with media. I know our HR department had done that, but on that fire picture that he had shown there, I think that was the same one, we had media showing up at the fire. So the guys that went to the HR department like they were supposed to because they knew to go there would get information on the story. The people that showed up at the fire were about to get arrested because they wouldn't leave. And we were going to call 911, have them evacuated or have them trespassed. But eventually they agreed to leave. It will give them the story. It's just they need to get it right. And by working with media, you'll get that. Secondly, understand that if it does turn bad, where somebody's hurt really bad, and no comment is never a good answer, because then they're going to be against you. What you need to just tell them is learn to say, look, we'll get you all the answers that we can get for you, but we need you to go to this person and they'll help you out, just do that. And then I guess the third thing is that if you practice it, if you understand what's going on, it doesn't really have to be a super emergency. If you went to that fire where you showed all the fire procedures going at the truck dump, people would look at that and say, well, why isn't anybody doing anything? Nobody's excited, nobody's crazy. It's because we know how our systems work. We test them, we run them, they work. Things do get a little bit out of hand, but everything's still basically under control. And it's gonna take a while to get the fire out because you gotta find out its source, but nobody's in danger, facilities aren't in danger, and it's in terms of the fact that we've now got it under control. So that practicing and that exercising with those people really makes a big difference and builds your confidence, would be my take.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Chris. Yes.
We have our emergency contacts posted, you know, near all our first aid kits, near our evacuation maps, eyewash stations, but when it comes to your designated like evacuation persons or like the ones that are going to be doing the head count, do you ever post those individuals, or you know, if this person's not there, then this is the follow-up, or is it just kind of word of mouth? No, is it written in your program?
It's written into our plan who's going to do certain jobs. And again, back to that, George is going to be our head count person because he's running the spray line. But again, George has been on 2 weeks of vacation. So this young lady right here, your name? Heather. Heather is now the line tender. So George has done a great job of letting Heather know that, by the way, this piece of paper for your staffing today is what you're going to do when you go out to the east or go out to the west to do head count. So yes, it's in the plan that the line tender and the the dryer tender are the 2 head count people on each shift.
So it's by position rather
by
than
position,
individual.
not by name. So thank you, good clarification, yes. Got to be by position because again, that changes day to day, shift to shift. Right.
So we do by position as well, and then in addition to that, when that person comes in for their shift in that position, they write their name on the whiteboard at the front. That says that they're the officer in charge, or they're the evacuation officer, or whatever position they're filling that shift.
Great, that's a good plan. That's really a good plan. I like it. Any other questions, comments? Hey, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming today. And I think that's about it. By the way, Merry Christmas. Thank you.